Welcome to the History AI podcast, where the past comes alive with facts, anecdotes, and a dash of humor. Here are your hosts, Chuck and Marco.
Hey there, history buffs. You're listening to the History AI podcast, where timeless tales meet cutting-edge tech. I'm Chuck.
And I'm Marco. Before we jump into today's gripping story, do us a quick favor, hit that subscribe button and leave us a 5-star review. It really helps more curious minds find the show.
Absolutely. Your support keeps us digging into and dishing out history's most fascinating moments. Today's episode? A covert, high-stakes drama, the Battle of Lima Site 85. Think radar tech, mountain warfare, and Cold War secrecy, oh my.
Let's head to the cliffs of Laos, where the clouds weren't the only things looming over American airmen in 1968. Let's rewind to early 1968. The Vietnam War is raging, but some of the most critical action is happening outside of Vietnam, in neighboring Laos. A country the US wasn't officially at war with.
Exactly. And that's where Lima Site 85 comes in. Perched atop a mountain called Phou Pha Thi, in northern Laos, this wasn't your average military outpost. This was a covert US Air Force radar installation, camouflaged from the world, and from the laws of warfare.
Lima Site 85 sat at 3,580 meters, or nearly 9,000 feet, above sea level. The terrain was brutal. Steep cliffs, dense jungle, no real roads. The only way in or out was by helicopter or a nerve-wracking landing strip clinging to the mountain's edge.
And that isolation made it perfect for its purpose, guiding US bombers to their targets over North Vietnam with pinpoint accuracy, especially during bad weather or night missions. It was equipped with the sophisticated TSQ-81 radar, derived from the Semi-Automatic Ground Environment (SAGE) system. This wasn't just another hilltop, it was the eye in the sky.
But here's the kicker, it was manned not by combat troops, but by Air Force technicians. Many of them wore civilian clothes. Officially, they weren't even supposed to be there because US combat forces weren't allowed in Laos. So, the CIA got creative.
That creativity turned into a full-on black operation. The CIA maintained the base's cover and security, relying on local Hmong fighters led by General Vang Pao to protect it. Meanwhile, US personnel ran the radar 24/7, directing airstrikes that were taking a heavy toll on the North Vietnamese.
But the NVA noticed. The base was too effective, too strategic. It became a prime target, and in March of 1968, they decided to do something about it.
And with the Tet Offensive already lighting up the headlines in Vietnam, few eyes were watching the mountains of Laos. But that was about to change, dramatically. Now, let's talk tech, and why Lima Site 85 was so vital to the US war effort. The core of the site was the TSQ-81 radar system, a stripped-down, mobile version of the massive SAGE system used back in the States. It allowed controllers to track enemy aircraft and, more importantly, guide US bombers toward targets using ground-directed bombing, GDB, for short.
Think of it like a long-distance air traffic control tower for warplanes. Instead of relying on the pilot's line of sight, these guys at Lima 85, many of them Air Force radar technicians disguised as civilians, could vector in bombing runs through radio communications and telemetry data, even when weather or darkness made visibility impossible.
And that made the site indispensable. By early 1968, Lima Site 85 was guiding more than half of all bombing missions over North Vietnam during bad weather. We're talking B-52 Stratofortresses and F-105 Thunderchiefs pounding targets based on radar fixes coming from a mountaintop that technically didn't even exist on the books.
But that effectiveness came at a price. The North Vietnamese figured out what was going on. Their intelligence reports, and some say even Soviet surveillance, helped them identify the source of the guidance. This wasn't just a mountain, it was a high-tech nerve center costing them aircraft, troops, and supply lines.
And tension at the site was growing. The technicians knew the danger. There were multiple reconnaissance missions spotting enemy troop movements around the mountain. Some even heard rumors that the NVA were planning a ground assault. Requests for better defenses, like adding heavy weapons or pulling the team out, were denied.
Because of the political tightrope, officially, no American combat personnel were in Laos. so reinforcing the base with military troops would have blown the cover. Instead, they leaned on the Hong forces under General Vang Pao, loyal but lightly armed, and often stretched thin fighting their own battles in the region.
Inside the radar trailers, tension was thick. You've got airmen pulling double shifts, aware they're vulnerable, and relying on a handful of local fighters to hold off a professional North Vietnamese army. But they stuck with it. These weren't soldiers, they were tech experts and engineers. Yet their grit and tenacity kept the radar online day after day.
They knew they were being hunted. And they stayed anyway. The final hours of Lima Site 85 played out like something from a fiction war movie, except this was real and terrifying. Let's go to March 10, 1968.
The radar site was already on edge. NVA scouts had been spotted around the mountain. Earlier in the week, U.S. aircraft flying recon missions picked up signs of troop movement nearby, cleared jungle paths, signs of bivouacs, and even camouflaged anti-aircraft emplacements.
Then, on the night of March 10, things escalated. Under the cover of darkness and fog, a North Vietnamese Special Forces unit, known as a Sapper Battalion, began scaling the cliffs of Phou Pha Thi. We're talking near vertical climbs with ropes and minimal gear. They were well-trained, deadly, and on a mission to eliminate the radar threat once and for all.
By dawn on March 11, just before 6 a.m., all hell broke loose. The NVA struck from the most unexpected direction, straight up the cliffs, hitting the summit from the east where defenses were weakest. The Air Force techs, most unarmed or lightly armed, scrambled for cover as grenades exploded and gunfire echoed off the rocks.
There were about 19 U.S. personnel on the mountaintop, most of them Air Force radar operators, plus a few CIA operatives and Hong fighters. But the defenders were vastly outnumbered. Estimates suggest over 300 NVA troops stormed the summit in coordinated waves.
Air support was called in immediately. F-105s and A-1 Skyraiders launched desperate close air support missions, dropping napalm and cluster munitions dangerously close to friendly positions. Pilots flying overhead said it looked like the whole mountain was on fire.
Amid the chaos, one man stood out as Master Sergeant Richard Etchberger. Though officially listed as a civilian, he was a radar technician and senior noncom, and a born leader. He grabbed a rifle, organized a defense, and began helping evacuate wounded comrades.
Etchberger reportedly held off enemy troops with an M16, returning fire while dragging wounded airmen to the edge of the cliff for helicopter extraction. When a rescue chopper finally managed to hover close enough in the chaos, he helped hoist multiple men into the sling, even as bullets ricocheted around him.
After getting the last of his teammates aboard, Etchberger climbed into the helicopter, but was struck by enemy fire just moments later. He died en route. His action saved at least 3 lives and delayed the full fall of the site, buying time for the few remaining survivors to escape. When the smoke cleared, Lima Site 85 was gone. The radar equipment, once the crown jewel of U.S. aerial bombing precision, was either destroyed by the NVA or demolished by American forces to prevent its capture. What remained of the summit looked like the aftermath of an apocalyptic landslide.
But the tragedy didn't end with the physical loss of the site. Of the 19 U.S. Air Force personnel on the summit that morning, 12 were confirmed dead. Several others were missing in action, with their remains unrecovered for decades. A few escaped down the cliffs or were pulled out by helicopter under fire.
And here's the heartbreaking part: many of the families of the men killed or missing at Lima 85 didn't learn the full truth for years. Because the operation had been classified, they were often told vague or sanitized versions of what happened, if they were told anything at all. So the story of Master Sergeant Richard Etchberger wasn't made public. His actions that day were heroic by any standard. He held off enemy troops, protected wounded comrades, and ultimately gave his life in the process of rescuing others.
The secrecy surrounding Lima Site 85 wasn't just about operational security, it was political. The U.S. wasn't officially at war in Laos. Acknowledging that military personnel had died there would have opened up a diplomatic firestorm. So, for decades, the story was buried in classified files and whispered rumors. Initially, the U.S. government awarded him the Air Force Cross, but under classified status. His family was told little about the nature of his death. It wasn't until 2008, when the mission was declassified, that a full review of his actions could take place.
And in 2010, 42 years after the battle, Etchberger was finally awarded the Medal of Honor by President Barack Obama. His son stood by as the citation was read, describing how their father had shown courage beyond the call of duty, fighting as a warrior despite being deployed as a civilian technician.
That medal was more than a tribute to one man. It was a reckoning with history, an acknowledgement of the risks taken by so many servicemen operating in the gray zones of a shadow war.
Today, a memorial stands at Maxwell Air Force Base, and Etchberger's name is inscribed on the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall in Washington, D.C. The battle is also taught at the Air Force Academy as a case study in leadership, sacrifice, and the high cost of secrecy.
And thanks to those efforts, and to the families who never stopped asking questions, the story of Lima Site 85 is no longer buried in the jungle fog. It's part of the historical record, where it belongs.
The fall of Lima Site 85 marked more than just the loss of a radar outpost, it exposed the fragility of America's covert operations during the Vietnam War, especially in the so-called secret war in Laos. It was a painful reminder that even the most sophisticated technology couldn't guarantee security in enemy territory.
Lima 85 became a turning point in how the U.S. approached covert warfare. It underscored the limits of plausible deniability. You can dress technicians in civilian clothes, disguise radar vans as weather stations, and call it an advisory role, but when the bullets fly, the line between combatant and non-combatant evaporates.
Strategically, the loss dealt a blow to U.S. bombing operations. For weeks after the site's destruction, air missions into North Vietnam lost much of their precision, especially during bad weather. Other radar stations existed, but none had the strategic vantage or coverage that Phou Pha Thi provided.
It also shifted focus onto the vulnerability of forward-deployed technology. The U.S. military began rethinking the idea of placing high-value tech assets in isolated, poorly defended positions. You can almost draw a straight line from Lima 85 to modern doctrines around drone warfare and space-based surveillance, where the operator is safer and the tech less exposed.
Then there's the human legacy. The Air Force personnel stationed there were radar techs and systems engineers, not infantrymen, but they showed the same courage and resilience under fire. Lima Site 85 blurred the boundary between technician and warrior, and in doing so, reshaped what heroism looks like in modern warfare.
For many Hmong fighters, it was yet another chapter in a long list of sacrifices made to support the U.S. cause. They defended the mountain as best they could, with limited weapons and no air evacuation plan for themselves. Their stories often go untold, but their courage was pivotal.
And let's talk about historical memory. For years, Lima 85 wasn't mentioned in textbooks or mainstream Vietnam War narratives. It wasn't until decades later, through declassified documents, veterans' testimonies, and persistent families, that it earned its rightful place in the record.
Today, it's studied in military academies as a lesson in the intersection of politics, technology, and battlefield ethics. It reminds us that war isn't always black and white, it's often fought in gray zones, with real lives at stake.
So whether you're listening today in 2025 or 10 years from now, the story of Lima Site 85 remains relevant. It challenges us to ask hard questions. How much should we risk in the name of secrecy? What's the true cost of war? And who gets to tell the story?
That's what makes this episode evergreen. It's not just history, it's a mirror held up to how we fight, how we lead, and how we remember. Marco, of all the high-altitude, secret bases you've read about, does Lima 85 stand out?
Absolutely. Between the altitude, the terrain, the cloud cover, it's like someone dropped Fort Knox on a mountain.
And the irony, a radar station so secretive, yet it became a known target. Strategy and secrecy colliding head-on.
Huge thanks to everyone who tuned in. If you found today's episode interesting, please leave us a 5-star rating. It genuinely helps new listeners discover us.
Want to suggest a future topic? Tweet, Instagram, or Facebook us with #HistoryAIPodcast. We're excited to hear your ideas.
Don't forget to check the show notes for new merch, episode links, and how you can support us.
All our episodes are evergreen. Once we release them, they're always relevant. We appreciate you joining us today.
I'm Marco.
I'm Chuck, and this has been the History AI Podcast. Catch you next time.
In the hills of old Laos, where the clouds kiss the sky, there stood a secret station where shadows came to die. No flag was flying overhead, no soldier in parade, just Texan brave controllers where a war was being made. They watched the Ho Chi Minh Trail send signals through the storm, guiding bombers through the mountains where the jungle kept no form. Perched atop Phou Pha Thi, they called it Lima 85, and every heartbeat echoed with a prayer to stay alive. Oh, the mountain burned and the night came down with rockets screaming through the crowd. They held the line till the final breath, whispers carved in stone and death. They stood their ground, though few survived. The ghosts still call from Lima 85. They came in March the 10th and 11th, the North Vietnamese like ghosts from heaven, climbing sheer cliffs under cover of night, with knives and rifles, no mercy in sight. Tech Sergeant Etchberger, armed with just a sidearm, pulled men from the edge with courage and calm, shot down but still standing, wounded and bold, his hands in the fire, his heart made of gold. The mountain burned and the silence fell, with secrets too dark for a grave to tell. But they fought with honor, they never ran, a radio post, a final stand. Though time moves on, some names survive in the wind that howls through Lima 85. They weren't supposed to be there, no boots on the ground, but when the sky lit up, no one turned around. The CIA kept silent and the world looked away, but the mountain remembers who died that day. Now medals hang heavy on ghosts long gone, Etchberger's name in a Medal of Honor song. But ask the wind in northern Laos, it'll whisper the price of what a war can cost. The mountain cried and the jungle sighed as heroes bled on the mountainside. No headlines told how they gave their lives, just echoes left from Lima 85. Yeah, echoes left from Lima.